Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I am naturopath Fiona Chin, co-founder of Kidney Coach and co-founder of Genesis, a range of supplements designed to support people diagnosed with chronic kidney disease to increase EGFR and decrease creatinine levels, among a whole pile of other amazing things. And I'm joined again today by one of our Kidney Coach team. I'm so grateful I get to say that, the beautiful Stephanie Modavis. Stephanie Modavis is a health coach, but she's so much more than that. She was a yoga instructor, yoga instructor, and she's done a whole pile of amazing work with the Venus and Mars stuff. But what really qualifies Stephanie as an expert on this podcast is she has gone through 2 kidney transplants and dialysis and really is the expert as far as the whole Kidney Coach team goes. Stephanie is the biggest expert on what it actually is like to go through the journey all the way to the end, really, of what chronic kidney disease looks like, including dialysis and transplant. She's managed to navigate that twice. So she is very well versed in the hospital system. She's done a lot of work in the hospital, working with doctors, working with nephrologists, really trying to improve the patient journey through there. Sometimes met with a bit of resistance, hey, Steph?
Yes.
She's a pioneer, and she's really trying to change the space for people really navigating this. So Stephanie and I always have these really amazing deep dive discussions where we look at the other side. From most of our podcasts are really the technical side of how to alkalize best and what nutrients and minerals work. Stephanie and I really go into the other side, which is just as important, which is the role of mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being in navigating all of this. So today we're going to talk about the role of the ego and its opportunity of really understanding that when it comes to healing. So Stephanie, welcome back to the podcast. I feel like I haven't spoken to you in ages.
I know it's been too long, but I'm so happy to be back, and thank you for having me on. And this is a topic that I'm really excited to get into for our community because it is just not well understood. And I think just really grokking knowledge around this topic will help so many patients. It's virtually changed my entire experience living with chronic illness and especially kidney disease. So super excited about this one, Fiona.
And I know you'll have this amazing slideshow for people to follow along with. So I'll just let you go ahead and share that, and we'll just dive straight on in.
So today we've got the role of ego and ego death or ego dissolution, and the opportunity that we have as people facing chronic illness, or if somebody has some sort of disease processes going on. So, Fiona, really starting this one out with a bang, just going right into ego death.
Love it. I don't expect anything less from you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Fiona. That's kind of like a backhanded compliment. So
no, it's definitely a compliment.
Yeah, thank you. So what I want to say is the reason why I think this is so important is because this language has been around for a very long time, in particular spiritual communities. Now, we're seeing a resurgence or an emergence of words like ego death, ego dissolution, shadow work arising again in certain spheres. Sadly, hardly not at all in the sphere that most patients are dealing with, which is the current medical model. But where I'm really seeing an emergence of this kind of, or resurgence of this kind of languaging is in the space, either around people who practice things like yoga and meditation very avidly, or we might say the spiritual community. Or you're seeing this a lot right now on social media and TikTok and all over with people who are experimenting with psychedelics as a means towards working through pain, trauma, PTSD, or people who are desiring to have some sort of spiritual reconnection. So I'm seeing this language all over, and I actually have had my own experience with this, and what I'm not seeing enough of, and I need to bring awareness. This would be my my Magnus Opus message to everybody would be that ego death and ego dissolution is not just for people who do psychedelics. It's not just for people who have meditate all day and night, or go to the Himalayas and study under a guru or at a temple. This is going on in virtually almost every patient that deals with chronic illness. But the issue is the languaging isn't there around it.
Mm.
And what happens is we actually have a different language in the modern medical system regarding some of the challenging symptomology that arises when somebody is going through an ego dissolution.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to go into this.
Yeah.
So I see this process and this suffering as a portal to conscious suffering and even a spiritual awakening and a renewed sense of one's self. So here we go. All right. So I just want to read this quote from Jed McKenna. He says, of course, battling past the ego to get to the truth has been at the heart of countless spiritual teachings in countless countries for countless centuries. Ego death as a means of no self abiding non-dual awareness is what this journey is all about. The only way past ego is through it. And the only way through it is with like laser-like intent and a heart of stone. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly. It enters a death process that becomes the birth process of the butterfly. The appearance of transformation is an illusion. One thing doesn't become another. One thing ends and another begins.
Definitely a very different way of phrasing it, isn't it? I love it. Lots of death. Yeah, it's a death, really, which we always, if we're like fluffing around the spiritual edges, we talk about metamorphosis, but, this is really about something dying to give way to something else, which is a far more dark, painful kind of swampy territory versus a metamorphosis.
That's a beautiful word. It is a dark swamp is what happens. And nobody likes, we can handle like a stinky little pond, but when it becomes you're a Gen Xer, right? So I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Never Ending Story.
Oh, I love the Never Ending Story. Yeah.
When it becomes the swamp that sucks Atreyu in and down, nobody likes that. And in fact, that scene to this day has still traumatized me when I see Atreyu sinking in the swamp. So the reality is we're dancing around this and talking about transformation and metamorphosis, and you're going to turn into a butterfly. It's amazing, and that is the profound opportunity within many of our breakdowns. But I think the call now is to realize that there's something a little deeper that we can't avoid to get there. And if we really just radically go in deep, the transformation isn't going to be superficial. It's going to be a sustained transformation where you literally feel like one part of your life has ended and another has begun, and you'll never see the two overlapping the same again. So I think what happens is when we're afraid to touch the depths and talk about what is ego death, what's ego dissolution, what is happening for me, am I just depressed and anxious, or is there a process going on that's really trying to initiate you into this metamorphosis if you just understand and kind of embrace what's happening? But because we don't have the languaging, we all know that when you're diagnosed with a chronic illness and you're juggling often a poorly run medical system in conjunction with your own health challenges and appointments and diets and frustrations, your head is so wrapped up in what's right in front of you that it's so easy for this beautiful invitation to get usurped or hijacked. And it can just look like us being told, well, of course you have anxiety and depression. You're in kidney failure. So let's just give you medicine for that.
Sorry, keep going.
No.
I was going to say, do you think this is part of this other term that is being used a lot in the spiritual realm at the moment, or, personal development, which is the spiritual bypassing, which is my big thing, is where people don't go into the muddy swamp and get sucked under. They want to skip across the top of it, pretend they've got their feet a little bit murky and wet and they've done the work because they've taken a couple of magic mushrooms, and they're not doing this great big death process. Do you think, is that an adequate way to describe the spiritual bypassing? So I am seeing a lot of this happening as well. People that, toe wet but not drowned.
Yeah. So, what came up very clearly when you said that, Fiona, it's the first time it so clearly came to my mind, is that, yes, to answer your question, is Yes, there's a lot of what we call spiritual bypassing happening in order to avoid the deeper, darker truths. But do you know who's actually most unconsciously guilty of this? Is the actual medical system.
Oh,
They are the ones that are spiritually bypassing.
absolutely.
Yes. Now to their, to their defense is a lot of them just don't know better. It's a
Mm,
complete unconscious. It's not unconscious for all of them. I think most providers understand that, oh, my patient has emotional issues. And of course, they have emotional issues or are depressed because they're struggling. It's just something that we've just so normalized in a reductionistic way that, again, you talk to any shaman, and from it's been around forever, anybody that's been in the spiritual community for a depth of time and has really good instruction, they understand exactly what's going on when somebody has a chronic illness. And spiritual bypassing isn't even in question, it's the priority in
mm,
addition to addressing the physical. So again, we just have it opposite here in the West, and we've cultivated a system that's completely hijacked by the corruption of pharma. I'm just going to say it. We need pharma for some things, and sometimes it's just very corrupt. And
mm.
how can we truly in the West address our spiritual health and well-being with providers or people who haven't even addressed their own spiritual well-being? So
Wow.
that's
Yeah, that's a rabbit hole in itself, isn't it?
we are having such a like this schism within healthcare is because I would guess that besides just wanting to get well, which is the natural inclination of anybody who's suffering in any way, shape, or form, give me the pill and help me feel better. Let's just honor and appreciate that as humans, we want that too.
Mhm.
Whenever I'm suffering, I'm like, well, it's going to help me take this pain away. But when we're dealing with things that are chronic, when we're dealing with things that are very serious, like kidney organ failure, dialysis, any sort of long-term chronic illness or disease, you would be just a fool to not realize that there is something so deep and holistic going on, and that you can try to avoid it. But I mean, I've learned going through this full circle twice is that as long as you're alive, life is gonna come around again and again and again and again to show you what you need to learn and embrace and experience in this lifetime. So
Mhm.
if you're beyond that stinky little pond and you are in the dark swamp of Atreyu going down, why not just look at what's coming up with clear eyes instead of trying to like get out of there as fast as you can? Because I certainly would like to address what's coming up and not have to have other situations and experiences in my life mirroring these deeper lessons that want to come through. So,
Yeah.
yes, your answer of spiritual bypassing. And yes, we need to all start to balance out the matter-based reality of this, or Newtonian physics, with the metaphysics and the quantum physics and the spiritual and the emotional, because what we're doing is not working. And it's so clear it's not enough. Patients are looking outside all over the place. We've lost so much trust within the system that what's going to happen is providers are going to have to go on their own awakening process. And many of them already are, based off of the traumas that have occurred around COVID, their own burnout, them realizing how they've been treated within a system like that's an unconscious functioning meta system. It's
Mhm.
unconscious on the meta level. So a lot of them are going through their own awakenings. And I've had the pleasure of working with a couple of physicians who were in a very, very dark place and helping them guide them through this process. And again, it's life changing, but we're just in the beginnings. But please, I don't want anyone to think that doing psychedelics is your only way to an awakening, or you don't have time to awaken now because you haven't done 20 years of meditation prior to your kidney disease diagnosis. Like, it's never too late, as long as you're breathing, as long as you're alive, as long as you're willing and you find people who've been through it to help be a guide for you. It's always available for you. Yeah. So ego death is not annihilation, but transformation. The process is often painful and disorienting, but it clears the way for a lighter, truer sense of self. This is what we're missing, Fiona. I think this is really what we're missing, is that when you're diagnosed with something, I think what happens is we get so caught up in the minutia of the immediate survival moments, right? It's like there's this analogy that we used to use in yoga when we would help people to relax and try to, if they were anxious or something. We would say, imagine that you're driving in a car on a very rainy, dark road that you're unfamiliar with. So you have to pay attention, right? It's winding, it's pouring down rain, and the rain is hitting your windshield so rapidly that your windshield wipers are going so fast that you can barely see the road ahead of you, right? So when you're on a chronic illness process within the modern medical system, because there's so many dysfunctions and it's so incoherent, it keeps us very busy to make sure that all our needs are getting met, and we're very focused on the physical and on our survival. It's very, very immediate, that what happens is we end up staring at the windshield wipers going back and forth, and then we lose track of the road ahead of us.
Yeah.
There's no vision. The vision, the meaning making, the meta experience is all completely dampened by the fact that we have to just focus on the windshield wipers because we're afraid, we're not well, our doctors aren't the greatest, the system is causing a lot of problems. It's just, we're so busy that we just totally lose vision of what's opening up ahead of us. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I loved how you described that. So you've given me a big visual, but yeah, it absolutely does. When you're sick and you're frightened too, right? When you're driving in a dark road, say the backcountry that you don't know where you're going, and the headlights are dimmed because of the fog and everything going on, and which is, chronic illness, and you're just sort of peering out the windscreen to look where you're going. It is very hard to sit back, relax, and understand that there's a bigger journey and things unfolding around you. And in that analogy, you can see almost the impossibility or how hard it is, and why we get trapped in, especially in a system that has you focusing on the windscreen wipers, right? So, and I don't even think there's, when you're that hyper vigilant, and I'm sure you'll talk to this, when you're that hyper vigilant and locked into that fear and being given potentially, like we call it the nocebo effect, but having word spells cast on you about your diagnosis and what your life is going to look like. And, the words that come from your specialists are very, very powerful. You can understand why people get there and get stuck there, and why they are just focusing on the windscreen wipers. And it takes a gigantic amount of effort and trust to be able to surrender and lean back into and feel a process that's happening, versus just how do you survive and get through every day because you don't know when you're going to get your transplant and if you're going to die the next day, So you get why people get stuck there, and you get why it is so hard. But it's, as you've just said, the system's not set up to support people moving out of fight or flight survival into this surrendered state of being able to have the bigger view, and then from that being able to experience this.
Yeah, make no mistake, no matter what you focus on in that survival mode, the bigger picture is going to come around at some point. So,
well, this is
right, is the modern the system and how we're set up to deal with chronic illness is, again, you're just so focused on those windshield wipers, and if anything goes wrong with a wiper because it's spastically running out of control, well then let's just fix another wiper. And again, it's just we're just losing so much robust richness that I think could help give patients something else to focus on that can potentially help them with the surrender and the soothing of their soul, if they can try to balance addressing their spiritual well-being through their process alongside coupling it with their physical process. If we could just somehow try to find a balance point. And again, you're right. This is we're proposing a new system, basically.
Yeah.
Something added into the current model. And this would require providers to, like you said, watch the words that they're saying. I mean, let's just be real. Let's just be very blunt. I've been very blunt lately, Fiona. Not in a bad way, but I'm just saying the thing.
I love it. Authenticity and truth. There's no higher frequency than that. So go forth and conquer. I'm coming with you.
If a provider doesn't quite resonate with this, or it's not their religion, or they don't feel like, they would just rather focus on the physical aspect and the clinical aspect of the processes, maybe at least they can understand this profound potential in the patient experience and patient outcomes, and maybe hire, connect with, affiliate with people who've been through this and have this spiritual experience, and maybe help that to be a guide for the patient. But it's so interesting now that I've been through this awakening process and have had years of working on my own integration. It's almost virtually impossible for me to have an honest dialogue with any healthcare provider that's holistic. It's so uncomfortable for me to show up authentically. I've been saying this for a long time, and I'll say it again, is I literally feel like I can show up with 50% of my authenticity in the office. Now, I have been blessed to meet a couple of physicians or providers who understand this terminology. They understand the profound relationship between mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being and chronic illness. They understand these terms like ego death. Maybe they've been through their own. Well, then that's a completely different resonant experience for me as a patient. And it just feels like what's accomplished in such a short period of time is so extraordinary because we are vibing at the same frequency, the provider and I.
Yeah. And here's, back to what I was saying before with word spells and things that providers without this nuance can put on you. What I'm hearing you saying in the subtext is when you went through your journey and you decided to reframe it, you were no longer driving through the night with the pouring rain. You were suddenly parked on the side of the road enjoying the view of autumn and the trees change. Like, it's a completely different perspective shift when you re-language around and talk to the beauty of the journey of chronic disease versus the symptomology, the survival, and all of those kind of things. You go from driving and having to almost focus on the windscreen wipers to, oh, hello, we can pull the car over. And actually, if we look out the side there, it's actually not raining and the fog's lifted and there's this beautiful mountain view. And it's, the whole perspective around what you're going through completely shifts. And in that, your nervous system shifts gear. In that, you can now have completely different conversations that you can't have when you're driving through the dark with the windscreen wipers going really quickly. And that comes down to the perspective, which I think, providers don't realize that, spells and spelling and the words that we use are just how powerful those conversations that providers have on patients and patients' expectations and the narrative that a patient will set around their journey that comes from their provider, and just how responsible they are. And I'll cut to the chase there too and be blunt. How responsible they are. And I know there's this huge thing in medicine about giving people false hope and having to be realistic, but I'm like, who sets reality? It's back to that Robert Bannister conversation that you and I had, a couple of podcasts ago. Like, who says what you say as a provider has to be the outcome that a patient goes through? Imagine if we created this beautiful landscape for someone to fill out and explore, and just how much better their nervous systems would be to be able to navigate that, and how much more enjoyable the journey would be. And so, I agree with your point. I think providers aren't providing if they're not working with someone like you, or at least doing their own work, or have gone and looked at that, because they're just providing a small sliver and then missing this whole perspective of the mountain view over the side, which is the environment in which patients are more likely to heal, in my opinion.
Yeah, very well said. And I think I just want to add briefly onto what you said is that this is tricky and it's nuanced, but it's
Mm.
also not. And
Yeah.
the reality, you and I, before we hopped on today, we're talking a little bit about spiritual bypassing, right? And one thing that we don't want to have happen is we don't want to give a story as a provider to the patient that is completely fantastical and just doesn't imbue truth in it, right?
Mhm.
Many providers are so objective, left brain, clinical, they don't want to even offer much hope unless they feel confident to really say that. So it keeps them very objective. And I can honor that about the providers, but also you don't want the providers to be spiritually bypassing the potential.
Correct. Yeah. That's a really great way of looking at it.
Right. And then you don't want the same with the patient. You don't want the patient to this my story, my invitation for a new narrative around chronic illness isn't to make up a story that's completely false to have you just, I'm not saying you all of a sudden you can be a rabbit and your illness really isn't an illness. And like, I'm not talking about just complete fantasy.
Yeah, which is
But I
also spiritual bypassing.
also spiritual bypassing. What I'm talking about is paradox and maturity.
Mm.
It's the provider understanding their role as this potential proxy parental figure, which I've heard is actually taught in their education, but then also kind of understanding from the patient's point of view that a provider, a good provider, should be skilled to have to be able to read their patient more clearly without bias and assumption based off of what they've been seeing in all their patients and lumping patients into disease processes.
Mhm.
Because again, this is why I'm personally having a little bit difficult time with some of my providers, is because I'm having this grounded, mature, articulate way of how I see my illness and my process and my disease no longer fits into the mainstream narrative. And then I have providers who maybe are new or they're not as confident in seeing things or working with a patient like me. And all of a sudden, they don't know what to do with me. And I've had so many providers literally say that, Stephanie, I don't know what to do with you. I don't know what to do with you. And,
Yeah, I've heard that
and,
one too, Stephanie.
and really, I'm sitting back thinking, you don't have to do any, you don't have to worry about where to put me. I think we need to worry about where you are. But again, this is just not what they're taught. And I understand the sensitivity around this because most providers are already very overworked. But
Mhm.
what we have to do is have to understand that hopefully through our patient experiences, the patient needs room for this process of ego dissolution, metamorphosis, and transformation. If you pigeonhole somebody and everybody into a box via their disease processes, you're harming your patient. Period. That's it. So
Yeah.
again, most providers don't have that discernment to they don't have time to kind of see where their patient's at in their psychology and then kind of pull back to let their patient bloom a little bit and kind of go on this self-development journey between the relationship of the patient and provider. It's just not really accessible. So back to the slide here. I believe chronic illness gives us a search for meaning and redirection. I think anytime, I told you today my car broke down in the middle of a highway, right? I think anytime God intervenes and something serious happens in the moment, it gives everybody a moment to sit back and reassess. Why aren't we doing that with our illness? Why are we assuming, like, oh, you got diagnosed with a chronic illness? Oh no, we got to treat this, we got to fix this, take this medicine. Why is there no room to say, okay, maybe this happened for a reason? Let me get my treatment, follow the orders, do the best I can for my health and wellness. But let me also understand that this may be a sign from above to have me be looking at my life and start to create meaning and maybe even some redirection in my life with my diet, with my relationships, with my friends, with my purpose, with my thoughts, with how I'm, working my own inner journey. Maybe I could clean some things up and purge some things when I'm in this process of my physical body breaking down. Right? So living with kidney disease involves, we know this, we talk about this all the time, physical, emotional, and spiritual challenges. I'm going to say that till I'm blue in the face because until the medical system's like, yeah, okay, we get that. All right. So many patients report feelings of loss, fear, and uncertainty about the future. Hello. Hello. Kidneys and Chinese medicine are connected to fear. We've talked about this many times. Shock, and fear. Okay. It is imperative for your life's process to not only help heal the kidneys, but we have to address this connection. We can't bypass this profound, complete cultural connection. Eastern acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine connection to kidneys and some sort of shock and fear. They know something. So you can replace a kidney, but if you don't address that shock and fear and start to do some inner awakening work as well, I'm a little nervous for the future.
Yeah.
I mean, when somebody asked me at first, years ago, when they told me this about the kidneys and traditional Chinese medicine, do you have a lot of fear? And I was like, I don't think so. Man, it took a lot of really just looking in the mirror and sitting with myself and allowing my feelings to come forth, allowing some things that happened to me to come forth, looking at my epigenetics, my family line, and just starting to see some of the symbology and patterns in my family life and my own history until I said, holy crap, I see where this is coming from.
You're right.
And I realized that it's a lifelong journey for me. This is a profound experience in this life's journey for me. And that it is part of my mission to do all I can physically and naturally to support my body. But if I don't honor that Eastern perspective of working through this inner fear and shock and finding myself a way to get out of survival mode, I think that's the whole purpose of my lifetime, is to couple those things. Yeah. So in my eyes, this journey can be a profound opportunity for growth, transformation, and finding that deeper meaning in life. And that's not something you hear very often when you go to the doctor and you get diagnosed with kidney disease or an illness, is get ready. You're going to be introduced to profound new meaning in your life.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
All right. So what is this ego thing? So the ego is our sense of I, our personal identity shaped by memories, roles, beliefs, and expectations. It helps us function in daily life, but can also create separation, fear, and resistance to change based off of those symbolic patterns. In illness, the ego may struggle with loss of control, loss of independence, and self-image issues. This is so common. This is so common. I think I told you that when I first got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, I was a budding professional yoga teacher with a successful studio. And I was ashamed to say I'm a natural healer, promote natural holistic health, and I have an illness. It just seemed to gel. But I realized much later and with much education that that's my education. There's no better education than a firsthand personal experience. And if you can navigate that well, then there's no education like that. So defining ego dissolution or ego death, ego dissolution is the experience of temporarily letting go of the usual boundaries of self. This can feel different ways. So when I say that, if people think about meditation and yoga and spiritual practices, they often, I think it's in this slide, can feel connected to something greater than themselves. Like, oh my gosh, I'm finally pulling away from the windshield and I'm starting to see the bigger picture. And oh my gosh, we're all connected. And these feelings I have in my side and this hate I have for my neighbor because they never throw their garbage. Like, things just start to shift and you start to have more of a process of understanding and love and connection beyond what you're used to simply seeing. It can happen through meditation, deep prayer, nature experiences, or even during moments of crisis, illness, and deep suffering. So that's a little bit confusing, as somebody can have an ego death experience being in bliss on the top of Mount Shasta and just being in awe, and all of a sudden, boof, it just kind of hits them spontaneously. Sometimes it happens in relationship. You meet someone and you're like, oh, it's the other half of my soul, and you wake up and all of a sudden everything's different. Your ego's freaking out about your story. Some people, it's just deep, profound self-study, prayer, meditation, where they relax the body enough to be able to handle these energies and feelings. But for a lot of us, it comes through suffering, through an accident, through an illness, through major loss, where all of a sudden you really start to question everything you know about the narrative that you've been telling yourself your entire life, and what other people, the society, government, whatever, has also been telling you your entire life. So you could kind of say that at this moment, we're not just going through personal ego death experiences and transformation experiences, but it's almost like the collective consciousness at large is almost about to enter into this deep awakening that what we've been told doesn't jive with maybe the truth of what's really going on. And this is dysregulating and uncomfortable when you realize that you've spent your entire life abiding by a particular narrative that you come to realize may be false. Challenging.
Very challenging.
So people often describe feeling more connected to others, nature, or something greater than themselves in these experiences. As I said, it can bring peace, clarity, and a sense of unity. But as I said before, paradoxically, it can also just feel like my entire life is breaking down before my eyes. It's like it's actually like you're in the cocoon phase of the metamorphosis of the butterfly, but you kind of have conscious awareness of it. You're like, okay, I'm in this cocoon, everything's breaking down, everything's getting sludgy and gross and nasty, and oh my gosh, there goes this, there goes my job, there goes this, there goes my partner. And it feels like an existential crisis. Some people, can call it, like, some people say, I'm having a nervous breakdown. So even if you just look at that languaging, some people, if you're going through getting a new diagnosis, or you have kidney disease and you're like super overwhelmed, and then other things happening on top of that, you have some family stuff going on, you're afraid of your own death, you might lose your job, your self-image is now not what it was, you don't look like how you did, you may die. Do you know how intense all of that is at the same time? It is a prime opportunity. You're about to enter that cocoon.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is the thing. If you don't have this narrative as an opportunity, you go into that cocoon and you're lucky as hell if you ever get out of that cocoon.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You may get out, but like you can barely fly. Or like,
Yeah.
you're not a real beautiful butterfly. You're like a low level butterfly, right? Like, we really, if you're gonna go through this, why the hell not just go through it and come through like a phoenix and really rise out like the butterfly, that like all what was just given to you, for you to be able to have the tools and opportunity to truly not just have a physical transformation, just couple your inner transformation with it as well. And that's holistic healing and health.
Yeah.
You like that picture?
So funny, you read my mind. I'm like, I love that picture.
Okay, so again, what is inner work is another thing that's going around a lot lately on social media, right? Shadow work, inner work. I've had so many people say, yeah, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean inner work? Like, what do I do? Where do I start? Yeah, I'm really uncomfortable. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I have no idea what's going on in my life. I don't know if I'm going to survive till tomorrow. Like, what do you mean? What's inner work? What do I got to do? So, inner work is the process. It's a process. Still,
Feel like you want to get that point across there, Stephanie.
like you might be doing this for the rest of your life.
Uh-huh.
But once you start, you realize, oh my gosh, how did I survive before without this process? I was totally asleep. I was
Yeah.
asleep at the wheel. That's why it's called awakening. Your vision, and you're able to be much more aware of the truth about many things. So, yes, the process of looking inward to understand and heal emotional wounds, limiting beliefs, and old patterns. These arise when you allow yourself to feel. That's the tough part about this, is
It
that
really is the toughest part.
yeah, in order to do inner work, you got to feel your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
You got to feel all your feelings. You got to feel the real painful feelings, because in that pain is profound information. It's like the alchemical gold waiting for you to be like, this is the thing I want you to look at it and reframe your mind around this, because when this happened to you, you weren't emotionally aware or intelligent enough at 5 years old when this happened to you to create this rigid pattern within your psyche. Please relook at this and reframe how you feel about this. I promise you'll feel much better about your life if you can reframe this. So you gotta just sit there and allow yourself to be uncomfortable without running towards an escape, a pill, a pint of Ben and Jerry's, like whatever you're running to get away from the feelings, the TV, the phone, TikTok, Netflix, like my partner, sex, addiction, alcohol, like everything in society is a distraction.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go against the distraction and offer yourself silence and time away in nature by yourself, and really just take as much time as you need to allow yourself to feel the uncomfortable feelings. And then just very gently, like you were dealing with a child, because most often this inner work is rooted in what happened to us as early in life.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a cycling pattern. When it comes up, you have to act like you're dealing with your own self as a younger child. You have to have an incredible amount of compassion and love. And this actually inner work is almost a process of reparenting oneself to give you maybe what you didn't need in those moments of hurt and disbelief and incredible pain or abandonment or neglect or abuse or whatever it is that happened. It's like you're now taking sovereign autonomy back of, your story back to you and rewriting the script.
100%. I totally agree with that.
So practices like just journaling, therapy, meditation, self-inquiry, talking with other people who are really self-aware, being in safe spaces where you can have intimate, vulnerable conversation without being judged. Like if you have friends that judge you, don't talk to, this is not for those friends. If you have family members who are just going to criticize everything you say, this is not language for their ears. You need to find the right people to do this work with, or can stunt you, or it can be even more harmful, right? But you learn really quickly who really is your tribe, who's your soul tribe, and just who's not. It helps you to learn that. So inner work also helps us to respond to illness with much greater awareness, acceptance, and compassion for ourselves and others. The other thing that illness can do, and I know this when I first was diagnosed, is it's tough languaging, but I'm a little tough love for my younger self and for everybody out there, is that when you're in survival mode, you can become quite narcissistic. You become very self-focused. because you're in survival.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's normal to feel self-focused when you're in survival. But when you're in survival all the time, it wreaks havoc more on your body and your health process. Stress, cortisol, blood pressure, all of this stuff ain't good for anyone with kidney disease, okay, or any chronic illness. And, moving out of that fight or flight, that survival mode, you realize too that when you're in survival all the time, it impacts people you're around. And in fact, an adult human being, unless in a serious threat, war, or something like situation, you should be able to downregulate your nervous system a little bit, even if you're facing something like an illness, even death.
Yeah. Sure.
You don't want to be in fight or flight 24/7. And I find that so many people in the organ transplant community, in the chronic illness community, who don't have a spiritual connection or natural connections to people that are involved in holistic health, they're in chronic fight or flight, and they can mask pretty well when they need to. They take lots of medication for their anxiety and depression. And when they come out talking about kidney disease or transplantation, they can put on a really good show. But I know most of these people behind the scenes, and they're in fight or flight 24/7. They just don't have the tools to downregulate appropriately, to give themselves breaks. And I think it's so important for everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So spirituality and consciousness in healing. So this is another terminology emergence. It's been going on for a little while, but now you're seeing it much more mainstream, especially in the realm of physics, quantum physics, anybody interested in holistic health, quantum biology, all this kinds of wonderful, new, fascinating sciences that are finally being recognized, is this term consciousness. And like, what is consciousness? And it's so funny. This is a true story. Is I was connected to a very upper echelon surgeon in the transplant field. And we were talking one day and I said, like, what do you know about consciousness? And he said, what do you mean? Like alive or dead?
Wow.
Yeah. So these are our top tier surgeons. No, I don't want to giggle. I mean, I profoundly love that person and have many people in the field who I adore very much. But there is a phenomenon that's already around, and it's going to become much more popular. And we're going to be connecting it a lot more with healthcare and healing, which is your state of consciousness. Are you conscious? Are you consciously aware? This connects very profoundly in with spirituality and the term spiritual awakening. This awakening and awareness are very closely linked. And
Yes.
what we want, if we're going to grow up, we're still all growing up here, Fiona, but if we're going to grow up in healthcare, we need to be conscious. We need to be much more aware of the holistic meta story, the individual, the mind, body, spirit connection. We need to become more aware. And that's where we're headed. It's just, it's difficult because there's people who want to double down and they think this is, for charlatans and it's woo woo and what have you. But the public has spoken. I mean, we're already doing so many things outside of the system. Again, the trust has been so diminished in the system. So we'll see what happens. But, I could see this going one of two ways. And one way is that we let the clinical side be the clinical side and honor the experts for the expertise that they have, which is, maybe surgery, maybe technicians, technicians and surgeons are very good at what they do most of the time. And then we just have this connection, this bridge to healing, not healthcare, healing, which is this inner holistic process. And there's more of a relationship between the two of them. Or the other thing that I'd like to see is just people who've gone through awakening processes help to educate the providers and help others to awaken, because there's nothing better in this life than awakening. There's nothing better than becoming consciously aware and understanding that life is beyond the physical and that your consciousness does not end with your physical body. And that's when people actually can start to live, when you really realize that you're not going to die.
That's
And
exactly.
sadly, we're just in a system that is half of the whole, and it's, you know, it served its purpose as best as it could for the time that it was doing what it's doing. But now if there's ever been a clarion call for something more, it's now.
Totally agree with that.
So spirituality is about seeking connection, meaning, and purpose beyond the material or physical aspects of life. It's about our capacity for awareness of thoughts, feelings, and experiences. Both spirituality and expanded consciousness can help us reframe illness, find hope, and experience healing on a much deeper level. Pretty clear.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
documented that most people who do have this, it works really well. I haven't heard anybody say, I've expanded my consciousness around my illness narrative and I'm on a spiritual awakening path and I wish I wasn't here. Never heard anyone say that.
I totally agree with that as well.
Another quote: illness and suffering as catalysts. Illness, crisis, or suffering can trigger awakening, forcing a confrontation with the ego and opening the door to deeper meaning and opportunity. Repeating the same thing. But, you know, Eckhart Tolle, a lot of spiritual teachers, I mean, they always talk about suffering as a portal to awakening.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've listened to Jeremy Renner on Joe Rogan, and anyone listening should listen to that podcast. It is probably, in my opinion, the best podcast Joe Rogan's done. He's done a lot of good ones, and Jeremy Renner was run over by a snowplow, and had an NDE, near-death experience, and just his take on life now, and you know what he experienced, and just you see how heart connected and open and mission driven he's become, and how he's rewritten the narrative around his experience and how he healed and the discipline he took into that. But he assigned everything to, you know, when he talks, you can see this whole thing that happened for him in this whole great big swoop of, you know, connected to nature and doing that thing and very disciplined and doing the things he needed to do to heal. But he was always attributing it to a greater mission, which was in part his daughter and in part his foundation. But, you know, he really does, whether he realizes it or not, he steps out the process he went through. And it's exactly what you're talking about in just his way of doing it. It's a very good podcast, but it's that letting go of fear of death and everything that you just spoke about, and then having a bigger why and a connection to what then inspires or drives us, or the mission that we have about our journey in life, which is really, you know, what I hear you've done with your rewriting of your narrative and everything you've been through, and you're now in the trenches about helping to shift all of this for other people going through, which is what most people I find that have a spiritual awakening suddenly get a deeper sense of purpose, or find their purpose in their dis-ease or illness, and then are able to come back, and it gives them their life meaning that the thing that they went through, the illness or the accident or whatever it is, suddenly becomes almost necessary for what they were here to do. And that completely rewrites illness. You know,
I love what you said, and I definitely will check out that podcast. And, you know, to simplify it and to reduce it, that's it exactly. You hit the nail on the head, is that once you go through a process like this, you see your illness as your greatest teacher and gift. Not something that depresses you, causes you anxiousness, limits your life. Woe is me. I have to be in survival mode all the time. And trust me, Big Pharma would love you to be in that place all the time.
Yes, they would. There's lots of money to be made.
They make a lot of money off of you being a victim, right? And I'm not saying all medication is bad. You know that. I take medication every day for my transplant, but this is just such a superior, more natural, holistic way. So yeah, so bridging ego dissolution, inner work, and spirituality. Ego dissolution opens us to the spiritual insights and a sense of oneness, reducing feelings of isolation. I know so many people that go through illness and they just become very isolated. They feel very alone. They don't want to burden family members or friends. So they just simply shut down. And how beautiful. I would just love this. I would be a part of so many more kidney groups and organ transplant chronic illness groups if we could get on calls and talk about how our illness has opened us to opened our heart, and talk about spiritual awakening all day and all night, and how we our meaning and purpose over the kidney disease or my organ.
I love that.
Yeah. So again, inner work helps us to integrate these experiences, leading to lasting change and personal growth, sustainable change, not just temporary change. This is why you see so very many people get an organ transplant. There's this very difficult process of the diagnosis, of trying to work the kidneys. And if they don't improve, then you go on dialysis. Then there's the process of waiting for an organ. And this is just a long, arduous, drawn out, very difficult journey. Very difficult journey. And if you can instead look at this journey as this opportunity, you come through it completely different. You don't get stuck in the fear and in that narrative. So again, I just think, this fosters that it's a paradigm shift is really what it is. You say, why is this happening to me?
It's very different now.
What are the broader reasons of why I'm sitting here right now facing what I'm facing? Could I be open to any messages that maybe God or the sacred is trying to give me? Is it time for me to look at my life a little bit different? Is it time for me to stop the rat race of how I've been living on autopilot and start to get very present? Maybe it's like a profound opportunity before one does eventually pass away, to be consciously aware of your life and feel like you didn't miss anything when you're on your deathbed. You're like, no, I became awakened. I went on this process. I addressed my fears. I did inner work. I forgave people in my life. I opened my heart. I found my meaning and purpose instead of going on to the deathbed with regrets,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So ego dissolution and inner work helps the health journey. It helps us to let go of rigid self-identities. This can reduce stress, anxiety, and depression. Again, when you go through or you get diagnosed with a chronic illness and you start to have some physical changes, I don't know about you, but when I first got diagnosed, I was very sick. Like I started losing my hair. Just chunks of hair were just falling out everywhere. I was on high doses of prednisone. I had the beautiful hump on the back of my neck, the real sexy hump on fat patch on the back of your neck. I just man, it just humbles you to life real quick when you see yourself disintegrating in different ways. It's like that process of the body's kind of breaking down. It does humble you. If you understand and you have this other thing to focus on, you, instead of fighting what is or looking in the mirror saying, oh my gosh, I look so ugly, or oh my gosh, you can just have an incredible amount of compassion for what your body is going through. Self-love through this disintegration is totally different than looking in the mirror going, oh my God, I look hideous. I can't go out. I can't do anything. I'm going to isolate. You see, one's just totally isolating and one helps to keep you connected.
Yes, very different ways of navigating it.
Yeah. Patients can report increased resilience, acceptance, and ability to cope with uncertainty when they start doing inner work. I'm telling you, I don't know about you, but I don't like to not know what's going on. I don't like to feel super uncertain. I definitely am a recovering control freak. I think most of humanity is. And but when you go on a spiritual path, uncertainty is just part of the process.
Absolutely. You can do nothing but surrender to it.
You can do nothing but just surrender. That's right. Just whatever's happening in the moment, you don't fight it. Okay, this is happening. Don't know why. Let me do the best I can to deal with it. And, I can think about it later. Just the aggression can be gone. The anger can be gone. The frustration can be gone. The yelling at people in your life, your kids, can be gone. Things can totally change if you just simply surrender and accept to what's happening to you in the moment, even when you don't like it. very hard, not
Mm.
easy, but kind of mature.
Yeah, it really is. Sometimes it's that when you're present to the moment, right? That's all about being in the moment. In the moment, you can't change what is, you can lean into it. That doesn't mean you don't get to make different choices going forward and have an influence there. But in that absolute moment, it's like, can I do anything about this? Yes. Okay. Well, then I've got a choice. I can do it. And if no, then I'm not going to project my stuff into the future and stress about it and go on a loop. My only choice potentially is just to surrender to this moment.
Yeah, when we're in that survival mode and we're in that, I don't want to call it narcissistic behavior, but very kind of selfish behavior because you're in fight or flight. This is when you start to see adults. It's like they're so overwhelmed, they can't quite handle their emotions. And this is where the healthcare continues I guess it kind of fortifies their concept of like, we have to be a proxy parents to adults who can't handle their emotions.
Mm.
So then it forces them like energetically to be super clinical and look at the patient as kind of like hierarchically below them because they're not objective, they're emotional. So when you have an emotional person dealing with an objective person, they're both of them aren't quite speaking the same language.
No, not at all.
So if we could get people who are overly emotional to learn self-awareness, inner work, profoundly increases emotional intelligence. Profoundly. Then all of a
Absolutely.
sudden the patients can express their feelings vulnerably without letting it overcome them. That means the provider can talk to them on a more resonant level without them being too objective to try to counter the over emotionality of the patient.
Absolutely. And I think, too, in fairness to providers, energetically, when you're dealing with patients day in, day out of highly emotional people, you end up becoming numb to it and blocking it as a way of just getting through your job from burnout because the system isn't set up to nurture and care for practitioners energetically. And they're probably not aware of that. But, when you're dealing back to back with really highly charged people, that is energetically draining. And self-preservation is going to have you become disconnected and objectify the patient in front of you. So part of all of that is as patients, if we learn to regulate our emotions, just like you said, we allow our providers space to better provide. But it's got to go both ways in a sense. Their own providers need to be aware how to set that up from the beginning with the wording and the verbiage and the language that they use. And, that's not happening at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And we'll see how that looks potentially in the future. But if you had a patient who doesn't know how to feel their feelings, who is overwhelmed in survival mode and a little bit, let's just say a little bit selfish in that self-preservation mode, the languaging that's going to come out to the provider is very different than if somebody just shows up and says, hey, let's go over here's my blood work. Oh, I see this is a little off. And, by the way, I just want to tell you, like, for some reason, like the last couple of days, like I've really been fearful. Like, I'm just like, if they can just communicate their feelings rather than being overly emotional or muddying the dialogue because the emotions don't really know how to be in the dialogue. So if we could just help people to get clear to say it's okay to say how you're feeling.
Absolutely.
Name how you're feeling. Don't be afraid. Don't pussyfoot around it or talk about something else. Or, very often we'll just say, like, I need medication for anxiety without telling the provider what's making them anxious. So just intimacy and vulnerability to just name what you feel. And it's totally okay to do that. So research and clinical insights studies do link spiritual well-being and mindful awareness to better quality of life and chronic illness. This is fact. Meditation, yoga, we've talked about this many times, how that can be so helpful. I think the things with mindfulness practices, the thing is that they do require consistency to help downregulate the nervous system so it feels safe enough to run more at a baseline of consistency. So if somebody, being a yoga teacher, I've heard this many times, like, oh, I tried yoga a couple times, it didn't work. It's not how it works. It is more of a lifestyle, is more like literally retraining of your nervous system, which is going to take time. And then the consistency of you showing up for yourself, even if it's just 10 minutes a day on your mat to breathe and center yourself and to be mindful, that's when your system feels safe enough to downregulate. So when we say mindful awareness, yoga, meditation, this means adopting a consistent practice, even if it's a day.
Yeah. And the word practice is perfect because you are practicing how to regulate your nervous system. It's a practice.
Right. And I don't know anybody, maybe they exist out there, I'm literally thinking, but who struggles with severe chronic illness, who couldn't use a little help regulating their nervous system and feeling more calm and peaceful, even amongst the situation they've been given.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Experiences of ego dissolution, again, outside of psychedelics, are associated with greater psychological flexibility and less suffering. I'm not opposed to psychedelics. This is a way that many people are going on this journey of opening their heart and awakening. But what I'm saying is that illness is enough of an experience to open your heart. My goodness gracious, if that's not enough suffering for you and you want to go do ayahuasca and throw up and vomit and poop all over yourself on top of it, go at it. But illness is really, honestly, like enough suffering that you need. You need to sit and listen to what this is bringing up, and that will catalyze your awakening. So, and obviously people who have chronic illness or are suffering with severe disease, they might not feel comfortable, doing psychedelics or, traveling out in Costa Rica or Peru or wherever to meet with a shaman to, I'm sure the doctor wouldn't be super psyched about that. It does happen, but all I'm saying is that you can do it if you just feel your feelings.
Yeah.
And sit with the discomfort. You don't need that like banger of an experience through psychedelics to just blast you out of your body. You can, but you're getting enough of an experience to awaken just as you are with your diagnosis. So, and healthcare providers are increasingly recognizing the value of addressing spiritual and emotional needs in patient care. I think I told you before, but I actually got I was potentially going to get hired in Florida at a clinic for a doctor who just straight up said to me, I do not have the bandwidth to help my patients with their emotional capacity that they need. And they need to sit with somebody who has a lived experience. I don't have the energy to do that. And I would like to hire you on the team to do that.
That's very honest.
So kudos to him, who was very holistically based as well. But he said, I have a lot of patients. This is my clinic. I see what my patients need. I can't provide that for them. So I'm seeking outside of the system to find somebody to fill that position. That's a visionary, in my opinion.
I agree.
Brave guy. So, and then practical approaches for patients. Always, I'm going to repeat here, try some guided meditations, mindfulness, spiritual readings to explore ego dissolution and inner work. Sometimes people come into this by just hearing a term. What's inner work? What's ego death? What's spiritual awakening? I'm resonating with that. What does that mean? And they start Googling it, and there's enough information out there to kind of start to open that portal for them to go on a journey. I think writing, journaling, writing your dreams down, I think that's all very great tools. Talking with a counselor, chaplain, spiritual mentor, or support group can help you to process emotions and insights. Again, often your doctor's not going to be able to help you process your emotions. I don't even know to say if it's their job or not. I don't know anymore. It's
I don't know how in the setup that they've got, which is 15-minute consultations and things like that they can do it. I just don't think the system's set up for them to be successful in that unless they practice completely outside the mold or in small country towns or where they know people, or you know what I mean. I don't think, in fairness to them, the system allows them to do that in a way that's safe and inviting to be successful.
The system doesn't set the providers up for the providers to have their own spiritual awakening.
That too.
It almost keeps them stuck in the clinical side of things. And it's difficult to watch, actually. I've seen so many physicians who dedicated so much of their life to their craft, to their calling. And maybe they have a level of expertise in something in medicine, but it is not holistic. It's very parts oriented. And therefore it's almost like they're seeing more in parts too. And it's such a disservice to not take somebody who dedicates their life to health and healing, to not imbue this side of it. It's like they're getting half of the whole.
Totally agree.
You know? So the journey is universal and timeless. Across spiritual traditions, the path to awakening requires facing and moving through the ego, not avoiding it or bypassing it. So a holistic path forward, my dream, we talk about this all the time. Facing kidney disease or any illness is not just a medical journey, but it's a whole person journey. Embracing ego dissolution and inner work, supported by spirituality, can bring healing, connection, and new meaning. And know that you are never alone. There are tons of resources online. There's communities, there's practices that are available to support you every step of the way.
Yeah, such a tough one, isn't it? And as you say, I don't think the system's set up for it. I think there needs to be awareness from the provider and a curiosity as a person going through that. For me, it's been a big thing about rewriting the narrative about what illness is. And very much, you mentioned this at the beginning, you're a yoga instructor, and when you were diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, the sense of failure that you had around that. And I had exactly the same when I was diagnosed with MS. And, and the continued feeling of failure of why you can't heal the same way other people have and all those sort of things. And I think really what made a big difference to me doing this journey was to really rewrite the narrative around illness and disease and what it is, and rewriting it as it is my spiritual path, and that suffering is a choice. And, I do all the things that I need to do to manage day to day. But, the whole notion that we have, and this is something I think is happening in the personal development world particularly, and which is spiritual bypass, that everyone should be healed. And then that makes people with illness wrong, or that there's something wrong with them, or they've done something wrong in a past life. And you've known I've spoken about this, but I think,
why did you manifest your illness?
Yeah, exactly. What did you do? You must have done this, but it's karmic. But I don't know. I think when I've rewritten it to, this is whatever I signed up for in this lifetime, and it is the process that I need to go through to become the greater version of myself. And when you rewrite the narrative to go, I don't need to heal, and everything I've got is provided for me in this moment with my body the way it is, you no longer are in separation and looking outside of yourself for things to come and rescue and save you. You become, that is the ultimate surrender of, it is perfect and I don't need healing because there's nothing wrong with me. It's a very different language. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean I don't eat super well, I meditate and I do all of those things, but I've been doing them for so long. And then it's that really self-honoring and doing the journey. But I really had to, for me personally, and I think anyone diagnosed with chronic diseases, rewrite that there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my body and my immune system, but that doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. They're very different. And that was the thing that took me the longest to really get. And the thing for me, at least, that's had the most profound effect is really separating me from what's happening in my body as being me being wrong. That was hard.
Yeah, that's very, very difficult. And, what we're talking about, it's not easy to wrap your head around. Now, if you have grown up in a particular religion or spiritual faith, you may be used to prioritizing the soul and the eternal nature of our consciousness over the physical body. Now, what's funny in that respect is I grew up in a family dynamic that had some of those beliefs, and their shortcoming was bypassing the responsibility of the physical.
You need to do both.
Too much emphasis put on the afterlife, and meanwhile, they're overweight. So let's be clear, the mind likes to divide and separate, or we like to reduce things to parts. We like to, think things are black or white, binary. And what we're proposing is very mature because it paradoxically is both. And it's about the energetic dynamic between your consciousness and your physical body. The physical dimension, the spiritual dimension, is that both of these need to coexist in a harmonious relationship. That's what we're asking. It's not to diminish the physical or the doctor's role in the healthcare process, but it's also not to bypass the spiritual responsibility, the emotional, mental responsibility that comes with a life journey around your illness. So it's not one or the other, it's both. And this is what most people have a hard time grasping and grokking. It's like we want to pick one and diminish the other. That's what the psyche likes to do for some reason. So the like adept spiritual path is to understand that we're spiritual beings having a physical experience, and we're physical beings having a spiritual experience, and to address and give attention and value and love to both of those simultaneously creates an intrinsic sense of wholeness, of healing. So one thing that was very interesting, and then we can wrap up, is I went through my first 10 years with kidney disease, autoimmune disease, kidney disease, hemodialysis, transplantation for 10 years. Very, very difficult, very much in the trenches, just doing all the physical stuff, fear, survival, the whole thing, high of getting a transplant. Oh, my life's going to be great now that I got a transplant. That didn't turn out to be the case. I physically got better. My blood labs got better, but my mental, emotional, and spiritual health tanked quite a bit after my transplant because there was so much emphasis on one part of me that when I got through, I was like, okay, my doctor said to, go get him, kid, enjoy your life. And I'm sitting here, now in my 30s thinking, never graduated college, don't have a job, thousands of dollars in debt. But like, who am I now? What do I want to do? Like, complete existential crisis about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And nobody even mentioned that might be something that was going to happen to me. But that actually ended up eclipsing a lot of the suffering that I went through during just the physical aspects of the kidney disease.
Interesting.
Oh my gosh, like nobody ever told me about this. Like, okay, I guess I got to deal with this. And that's what I did. And that took me, believe it or not, maybe I'm a slow learner, but it took me 10 years to go through my physical process with kidney disease, hemo, and transplantation. That was like strictly more or less physical. It took me 10 years after that to integrate my experience and get my spiritual, psychological health strong. 10 years, 20 years to process that first transplant. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I went through it again. As soon as I grappled,
make sure you really got it.
The second time I did it felt like complete and utter witness mode.
Interesting.
Like observing it now with this greater lens of not just going through the physical process, but having that 10 years of very deep spiritual practice and integration of the experience. I just sat back and watched my entire second process. My feelings and emotions were completely different. My surrender was top notch. My pain was virtually nothing. My recovery was so fast. It was scary. I took no pain medication. It was like, I've been through this before. There's nothing to worry about. It's going to be what it's going to be. Just ride the wave. And I just completely got on my surfboard and just surfed the whole way. And when I got that kidney the second time, I was in the ICU. I told this story many times. In the ICU, literally just having my kidney transplant. And I sat up and I'm doing this. I'm repeating this. I'm crossed my legs like Indian style, right? And I sat up in the bed and I said, I'm ready to go home. I'm healed. And the nurses said, oh, darling, you're just still a little high from the anesthesia. Lay down. You ain't going nowhere. And I said, no, you don't understand. Completely healed. And
Oh.
they didn't know what I was talking about, nor did I expect them to know what was happening within me. But in that moment, I realized that now I understand. If I live or if I die, which we all will physically pass at some point, my soul, my consciousness was reconnected and I was healed. So for me, doing that inner work and really healing my soul and giving myself that experience to awaken on the inside, that was my healing. And that's something that nobody can take away from me or anyone else.
And that's right. And that's something that no one has sovereignty over and that no one dictates. And, you know, it's a completely different thing. So, yeah, that is your thing. But no doctor or family member or partner can speak into or take away from you. So, yeah.
Basically, long story short, is what it eased was my fear of death. And man, if you can accomplish that, you can really live.
Yeah, that's what exactly I was about to say. If you don't have a fear of death, then you can live properly, fully.
Yeah, yeah. So that's it, Fiona.
I love it, Stephanie. Thank you for sharing all of that. That was great. If anybody has any questions, please put them in below. If anyone wants to work with Stephanie, Stephanie does provide our kidney coach in Kai Genesis community one-on-one coaching around this sort of stuff, right from the how to navigate and have these sorts of conversations with your nephrologist and your providers, all the way down to helping you embed these deep spiritual practices into your life so that your journey with kidney disease actually can have a deeper meaning and you can come out the other end a bit like Stephanie has. So she works from the whole gamut and range of all of that sort of stuff. I'll put the link in below. You can click the link and make an appointment online. She does those via Zoom for whoever you are, wherever you are in the world. I'll also put a link to Stephanie's website. She's got lots of great programs and other bits and pieces that she's working on there as well. And if you are a provider or you work in a hospital and you think having Stephanie into your system would be of benefit, please reach out to her directly. You can do that through her website. Stephanie, thank you for being here. I should say too, make sure you hit like and subscribe. That way you will get notified anytime we put up more information. And if you have any questions, please put them in below and we will get back to you. Stephanie, thank you for being your amazing self and for the journey of taking yourself on so you can bring this message to other people going through chronic disease. I think that is the blessing that I hope everybody can see in that and how you get to be part of the whole and the whole we are connected thing. You're a prime example of that. So thank you for being you.
Thank you so much for providing the space for me to be open, honest, vulnerable, and transparent about all of this cool emergent stuff happening. So thank you, Fiona.
Pleasure. Thank you. Yeah, like I say, I love having these conversations. All right. Thank you for being part of our community. We look forward to seeing you all next time. And until then, bye.